get started because we only have 2 hours and we have so many people in this panel. I will just briefly introduce everybody that will be on the panel. Sitting on my right is this gentleman, this good-looking guy, Ryan Niemiec. And here is another powerful wild man, Todd. Kashdan. And here's this young lady, Kathryn, Britton. This is Hart, nothing bad. Michael Steger. And here's my buddy, Hart. And here's old me. This will be I'm experimenting with this session. I don't know how well it will work, but we'll try to make it work, okay? So let me tell you a bit of history, how to get started. So this guy and I often get into debate, okay? I really appreciate that he's the only guy on the party psychology listserv that is decent enough to engage me in intellectual dialogue. So I said, no, we can't settle all these issues through email. Well, what do we meet face to face? Come to my meeting conference. That's how it started, right? And then we said, well, we need more than one person. I said, a few more. Originally, I was trying to get him involved. He said, oh, I can only come on Sunday. Originally, this is supposed to be on Saturday. So that's why. But you feel free to, anybody can jump in, okay? It's just informal, okay? So let me tell you about how it goes. I will start opening, talk about some of the issues that we've been discussing, okay? Because that's how it got started, right? And then you can jump in and challenge me, stop me, whatever, okay? So there's a roaming mic somewhere. Where is it? Jeff will be kind of mic to you. And I'll be followed by Todd, who will be, and then will be. Well, don't worry about the program. That's outdated. I emailed you already, right? I mean, that my email will override that program. So, okay, let's do that. You first, you second, you third, you fourth, you last.
Oh. So that means you get the last word.
Okay, you want to be last? Okay, last. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I get started first because I organized it, right? Sorry about that. You can tell I'm a Chinese guy, right? I come from a country that is known for suffering and the trouble and the earthquake and drought and flooding and the invasion by foreign powers, the British, the Japanese, the Russians, the Germans, everybody invade China, right? And I went to Nanjing to give a talk this year. I visited the Nanjing Massacre Museum, to see people got slaughtered, the woman got a breast cut off, and the children, baby got hang on the lamppost. Almost 300,000 people were massacred, in a killing orgy, day in, day out, the competition to see who can kill more people. Personally, when I graduated from high school, I have to do a shit job, to support my parents, I have more failure than successes, unlike you guys, right? So, to me, life stinks. Life sucks. Life is suffering. So when I hear this part psychology say, oh, life is great, life is good, everything's good, and when my friend Baumeister says that bad is stronger than good, the part psychology, we have a problem here. This Baumeister says, of course bad is stronger than good, of course. Then why the wicked people prosper? Why the good guy like me, being poor? They always, the wicked people, they take billions of dollars from innocent citizens. The wicked people prosper. So I really have a problem with this, the life is a good thing. That's why in my article here, I say that parapsychology is too Pollyannish, They're not in touch with the real people. I went to so many places in China to speak, and so many people say, well, Paul, your version of parapsychology really resonates with us. It's not one person. There's so many people in so many cities. So the first point I would say, as a meaning orientation and happiness orientation represent two different visions or different prototypes of good life. And so my counter argument with Martin Seligman is that life is about meaning, it's not about happiness. It makes me sick when people talk about how to be happier and how to be more happy. I did a study show. If you do all the good work in one day, you are happier than doing good work every, at different days. So the lesson from science, don't keep all the good work in one day. Then you feel happier. Science like that make a mockery of goodness. If you're a good Samaritan, you help people when there's need. I can't do that. I do good work on Wednesday. I can't help you, sorry. That's make a mockery of science. Another study show, another person on list up say, my mother-in-law asked me to fix up something, and I told my mother-in-law, my character strength is creativity, blah, blah, this is not my character strength. I'm not going to help you. That's misapplication of science, right? We see that? Horrible misapplications. All in the name of science. I feel sorry for scientists, true scientists. So I say that science has to be humble. Has to say, there's a lot to learn from religion, philosophy, literature. Jonathan Haidt is good, and he's broad, and who else? There's a lot we can learn. Not science is king. Science is nothing. Science cannot tell you right from wrong, right? You mentioned that yesterday. Yeah. So that's my first argument. My second argument is this positive and negative, okay? And parapsychology has a problem with negativity. I remember years ago, one person on listserv say, how to increase your enjoyment of sex, how to increase the flow, okay? So I wrote back, being trying to be helpful. I say, well, from the point of view of logotherapy, Franco's work, I said, one of the problems that you cannot enjoy sex is because too much performance expectation. Expectation anxiety interfere with the flow. And then, sure enough, I got people from the list say, oh, Paul, you should not mention anxiety. You should not mention anxiety. But anxiety is a negative psychology. I got this rap all the time from this nuts in parapsychology, okay? They're really nuts, they're crazy, okay? You can only talk about positive, not negative, okay? Of course, you have to reduce anxiety, you have to enjoy the positive, right? So, but anyway, so that's one issue. And the third issue about the vision of parapsychology, I'm thinking that the future of parapsychology should be more interactive between negative and positive, more eudaimonic, means more emphasis on virtue, not just from virtue, there are two kinds of virtue. One is the success value of optimal functioning. The other one is ethic, moral-based virtue, right, of goodness. Goodness, the good life, good. The term good is not moral virtue. It's not a value neutral, right? Good, the word good is not neutral, value neutral. The good life had to include a virtue component. Right? And also, existential is that I'm thinking that that all the emphasis on happiness-inducing activities, strength-enhancing activities are good. But that's only half of the stories. Half the story. If you do not have a purpose in life, you mentioned about yesterday, you don't have a purpose in life, you don't know what you live for, you don't know who you are. If you believe that there's nothing in life that worth living, you tell me to give it all to exercise, I said, what for? I'm not interested in all that. I'm not interested in happiness. I'm not interested in just leave me alone, let me die. Right? So there had to be something, you had to resolve some deep existential issues. And cross-culture, every culture has moral norms, right? What's good, what's bad. So you cannot get rid of a culture. Robert. Your father really believes in cross-culture. He is a cross-culture psychologist. So the new generation of parapsychologists believe in cross-culture. I mean, the old generation saying, oh, we are scientists. All finding, it's just like physics laws. It works all across the land. It applies to everybody. It's bullshit, okay? In Chinese society, in a Japanese society, it's so collectivistic, right? So what is? I wrote a paper with Fred Liang, he's a well-known, Fred Liang, he's the president of International. I wrote an article with him about parapsychology, optimal functioning from a cross-cultural perspective. What is good, what is optimal, is not just for you, but often it's for the family, for the group, for the company. So you have to have this individualistic and combine me with we, okay? So these are the three big issues I have. And now I'm 42 slides, so I will stop right here. And so if you're interested in my idea, I can send you a copy. That's 45 slides. So I'll stop right here, okay? Thank you. So anybody want to challenge me? In my workshop, anybody want to challenge me? I give you $10. If you win the argument, I give you $100.
I know I have my turn to speak later, but I just want to put in one of my pet peeves in life is the way people use the word Pollyanna to refer to unrealistic optimism. This is actually a book that is about somebody talking about how you live your life. And Pollyanna herself is actually somebody who plays something called the glad game, which is to try and find whatever there is to be glad about in whatever the situation is. So the original glad game, she gets a pair of crutches instead of a doll. And her father says, okay, how do we play the glad game here? And she can't think of any reason to be glad about getting a pair of crutches. And so he says, well, how about the fact that you don't need the crutches, that's something that you can be glad about. And the whole book is about how she helps other people learn how to see the gladness that exists in their very hard lives. And her life is no easy life. So anyway, that's just a pet peeve I have.
Thank you very much for giving the background. But in a common day language, Pollyanna-ish means people have this seeing the world through rose-colored lens, right? So that's common usage now. May not be accurate, right? Another question. If not, then I will get the gentleman here, the wild man. Come on. Show up your muscle. Show your muscle.
Is it all right if I don't use PowerPoints and actually talk to you?
Oh, yeah. I use PowerPoint. Talk.
I'm actually going to... All right. So I'm going to tell you a story that's not interesting or funny, just because it just recently happened, because I don't want to use my PowerPoint slides. So I recently saw Inception, which was... And this movie was, like, effing brilliant to me. You've got, and I will not give away the movie, and even if I did, you still wouldn't be able to grasp the concept of it. So you've got a dream within a dream within a dream within a dream. And I see this movie, I watch it, riveting, I'm with my wife afterwards. I'm like, this is so freaking cool. Like, this guy can capture that level of complexity in a visual representation. And it made perfect sense to hold these 4 dream sequences simultaneously, and they're fluid. Like, I've got to do something better with my career, something more profound, because this guy can do this visually. The stuff that I'm publishing is not interesting enough. So I went home and we were talking about this, and she's like, oh, you publish enough, you write enough things. Like, what are you talking about? I'm like, no, but that was like the magnum opus. I need a magnum opus. And so I went home and I looked up all the reviews because I thought to myself, who could possibly write a negative review about such a profound, brilliant movie? And of course, The New Yorker and a whole bunch of magazines do. And I was so happy to read that it took him 10 years to write this script. Because I thought to myself, all right, that's cool, because that means that brilliance is possible to me. And I was so motivated that within the next 7 days, I had written a 50-page grant to the Department of Homeland Security about studying resilience in firefighters in 5 days. One of the biggest writing bursts of my entire career. There was one night where I tried to make sure that I was writing about 12 hours a day. I was waking up at about 5 o'clock every day in the morning. It was due on Friday. I found out about this 5 days before the deadline. We contacted five different collaborators, 5 different states in the country. We got this together. And then when it happened on Friday, and I had to send the email off, my wrist, the carpal tunnel syndrome, had built up so quickly that my arms were shaking that I actually had to hold my right hand to press the mouse, to press the send button. And this was such a burst. And I did make sure that even though I was working so hard, I'd get home in time to be able to tuck my 3-year-old twins to bed each night. And when the second they went to sleep, I put on my big DJ headphones, plugged it into my laptop, and then wrote away for about 8 hours at nighttime, and I didn't sleep for the entire week. The reason that I bring this story up is that this process, this dynamic process, what have we done in positive psychology that comes close to capturing this level of complexity? So here you've got this element where this level of admiration towards this filmmaker, Christopher Nolan, this level of inspiration that inspires me. I have no idea the absolute direct linkage to this amazing surge of writing. And I've written a lot over my career, and I'm considered a pretty prolific writer. I write on average 3 to 4 hours a day. And you've got this surge of productivity. I'm able to compress my self-concept, to focus on my work. Even though I care about my family, I compress it so that more of myself is devoted to work, but I'm giving a completely insulated time to my children under helium and glass that's not going to be affected because it's a profound source of meaning in my life. So despite the fact, this deadline I have to hit, if I get this grant, a major source of income and sort of, and research productivity will come into my life. But this is protected under helium glass. This level of dynamism, of complexity, and then I'm able to compress myself out after it's over to return back to my work-family balance. These are the kinds of things positive psychology needs to study. I'm not talking about construct. I'm not talking about gratitude. I'm not talking about strengths in action. I'm not talking about emotions, negative or positive. I'm talking about real life as it's lived. This is where the future of positive psychology is to study these kinds of notions, starting from there, not starting from, I want to put that hardiness scale I just heard about in the keynote today into my study. I want to put on the new measure of savoring that just came out. Hey, there's a measure on emotional complexity. It's the wrong approach. We need to start with what is it that makes life fulfilling? Develop the questions first, then focus on the tools to get there. Where we are now is we are a tool-based discipline where every time a new construct or a new measure comes out, we get incredibly excited. There's a surge of research on that topic. The resilience measures are out. The emotion regulation measures are out. There's about 15 different strength measures that are out. And so this is what we study. Instead of thinking, what are the domains of life that we're actually interested in? How does the spillover from watching a movie or listening to beautiful music end up having a spillover effect and enhancing my persistence, the grit, and the productivity in the workplace? What happens at home that can have a subsequent effect in terms of my work productivity the next day. The type of communication, the amount of love and affection that happens there. But again, not focusing on the constructs, but focusing on the domains themselves. We haven't mapped out the complexity of humans in positive psychology. And I think one of the reasons is we really do love overly simplistic, reductionistic models of things. I talked a little bit about this yesterday during my keynote, but when it comes down to it, we need to look at synergy between ideas. We need to look about what happens in everyday life. We need to understand what Paul's talking about with the negative and positive. When we think about the negative in positive psychology, I think about the superficial versus the fully integrated. What you hear from people in positive psychology now, other than Paul, is this. Negative emotions are useful. Of course they are. I mean, it's part of our measure of subjective well-being. They're important to us. And we have a measure at the end. Our outcome measure is the reduction of negative emotions if we use our strengths more regularly. Or here's a pain tolerance task. That's going to be our measure, our outcome measure. Or we're looking at how being more grateful or forgiving buffers against stress. These are superficial ways of thinking about how the negative can be integrated with the positive. When we think about more complex ways, it's the idea of kind of bridging what Paul's talking about, is that things happen to us in the context of our daily lives that's fully integrated in terms of the negativity. So if you think about terror management theory, the recognition of our own mortality, the fact that we're going to die, we get cues all the time. Turn on the news and see how many people hate Canada or the United States. More likely to see a news report about the United States than seeing people dislike Canada, unless Michael Moore is babbling incessantly for 2 or 3 hours on CNN. I kind of like him, but he's a babbler about these things. So we have these cues. We have these signs. When I look at my library at home and I recognize that my mortality, even though I'm only 35 years old, I recognize more mortality by how many books I have left to read in the short amount of time I have on this planet. That's my mortality salience. Actually, funerals, deaths, those don't affect my mortality. But the fact that there's so many amazing books I will not get to read, that's my mortality cue. Now, integrated with that is this mindful kind of awareness of this, working with these emotions, working with this mortality experience. And in there somewhere, in that complexity, not watered down to death, anxiety is negatively correlated with a measure of positive emotions, which is how we study it now. But studying this complexity of what will that impact? Now that I've thought about my mortality by looking at my bookcase, thinking about the books that people are recommending to me, how does that subsequently affect other things that's going to go on the day? What I'm going to eat, my sexual relationships, how I am as a parent, my moral foundations for this day. Another aspect of positive psychology, the final thing I'll talk about, because none of this, I don't know what's coming out of my mouth right now, is the idea. It's basically the idea of we've thought about our tools as being direct reflections of reality. And so we have our measure of personality, and thus we assume, well, what's a personality trait? It's something that's a stable set of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors across situations. But the way we measure it is we give someone a questionnaire at one time point as if it's a static thing. I am an extroverted person. I'm a grateful person. I'm a creative person. Well, no, we ebb and flow in and out of these personality profiles, these behaviors that we engage in. You're not a mindful person. You don't invite someone to have a mindful life because they do an 8-week session, 8 weeks of work with John Kabat-Zinn or someone else. You ebb and flow out of this. I could be mindfully engaged with you right now. Right now we are building something, some ideas that are happening that are not pre-planned, pre-arranged, pre-organized, in a little spam packet that's going to pass the test of time with a bunch of cockroaches. What's happening here organically, I will immediately disengage from this state. Every once in a while, I overthink about things. I'm mindful. I'm overly thinking. I'm ruminating. I'm mindful. We don't study it this way. We study as binary. Mindful or not mindful. And I want you to be a mindful person. What we need to study is, the fact is, we ebb and flow. I'm extroverted in this situation. I need some time to contemplate and think about that really amazing talk I heard. And I want to sit back and reflect on this. I want to have a tranquil moment to replenish my energy supply because I know I'm going to go out drinking with a couple people later. This level of complexity Until we start mapping that, we're not coming close to the good life. We're having an artificial straw house of what the good life is because we're letting our tools dictate what it means to have a good life, how to achieve it there, as opposed to actually studying the thing itself. And so I think the challenge for positive psychology is not being caught up in the psychological conflicts of interest. We all have our favorite constructs, our favorite interventions, our favorite tools, our favorite researchers. We need to challenge everything. We need to have a punk rock ethos, kind of like what Paul Wong was talking about. Seligman's not always right. Paul's not always right. Half the things I'm saying is crap that I'm talking about right now. The things that are published doesn't mean that it's in the annals of science that this is a truism. Barbara Fredrickson's model of the broaden and build, most people don't even know what the data is to support that model in terms of separating the broaden part and the build part. We assume these things are true, and we don't challenge them. We're not a monolithic empire where everything that comes out of the University of Pennsylvania because Seligman founded positive psychology automatically becomes the zeitgeist that people should be listening to. We should be constantly challenging things. We should be going back to the Hans Eysenck way of science, which is through rigorous intellectual debate. We will evolve greater ideas because the people don't matter. What I write might matter. I don't matter. So attack me, attack the ideas, attack everyone. You know, if you see the Buddha in the middle of the road, you should kill him. That should be the philosophical perspective that positive psychology has. Instead, we have hero worship in terms of we've got these pillars. We've got programs where we pay $40,000 a year to meet John Haidt and Barbara Fredrickson and Sonia Leah-Bromirsky. And someday, maybe, you know, Steger and Robert Biswas-Diener when they do something a little bit more productive and useful with their work. This is not the way science progresses. Science is a battle of means and ideas to create a better understanding about humanity and the best, most effective strategies to help create that life for the individual people in front of you. By missing the complexity, we're missing the picture. And so what I ask for the future, for my visionary idea, is that we appreciate and engage with this complexity and this messy nature of humans. And we try our best to kind of do it. And we're going to fail on those efforts, and people will build on our shoulders to improve that. Thank you.
Can you say that again?
Could you give us the 90-second handle?
I'm sorry, you've written a good book.
That's not my question. Anyway. No, it's not microphone. You just use it. It's not amplified.
Goes to him.
We need to talk into the mic. Yeah.
Okay, I love your admonition that we should be studying dynamic processes, but I think that you, I mean, we're not idiots. The reason we study constructs is because they are reductionistic and they are simpler to understand, and they're great vehicles for breaking down the real world.
Robert, can you turn it on?
Is it not on? All right. There's no way I'm starting over. But, you know, it's like you can't get a tattoo that's life-size of you on you. But you could get a tattoo of you that's smaller on you. The complexity cannot mirror the real-world complexity. Otherwise, we would just live life and we wouldn't study. We have to be reductionistic. So how do you reconcile the increased dynamism that you want and the simplicity we must necessarily offer?
It's a great point. And I think I do talk loud.
No, he needs it for the recording.
No, Robert, it's a really good point. We've had these conversations before, but it's nice to have it in a room full of people so that people actually think we actually talk about something other than Christopher Nolan movies. I think what's the problem is everything you're saying is true. I completely agree with it. We studied this. What's happened in positive psychology is the cart before the horse, is that the basic necessary foundational research to understand, define, operationalize these constructs, measure them, see what they're related to, and are they really relevant, which are the most important predictors, is being overinterpreted in terms and being rushed to intervention. Because positive psychology has become such a great money-making opportunity that people are rushing with the basic science that you and I see as the building the initial foundations as, hey, we've got ourselves a new intervention here. We've now just discovered that self-forgiveness is related to employee well-being even when you control for life satisfaction. That's our new intervention. And what that study really was to show that is this construct actually useful for a starting point? And that's where the problem lies, so thank you for letting me flesh out the message a little bit further. It's not that we don't need sort of this initial static research with sort of crude measures. It's that we have to be very, very careful. The scientists first, the applied practitioners as well, is not over-interpreting research that does not actually inform intervention yet.
Okay, next. We'll save some questions to the end so that everybody have a chance to speak.
I'll do this. Okay, well, hello everybody. I'm Ryan Niemiec. I'm going to be giving you sort of a practitioner perspective. I'm the education director of the VIA Institute, which is the nonprofit organization that bridges the science and practice of character strengths. And I thought I'd start with a little story. I wasn't planning on it, but since Todd talked about movies and talked about the complexity that we need to look at in terms of nuances and in terms of really speaking to what makes us human, I saw the movie Invictus. I don't know how many of you have seen the Nelson Mandela film Invictus, several of you. And before I saw the movie, I had been in sort of a semi-argument with my wife. She and I had been arguing about whether the whole issue of having her spending more time with her family or not, with her parents, and I wasn't being terribly empathic and understanding. I was just kind of going by my own bias, my own kind of self-interest, and wanting just to have my own time and have time with her. And then I went and saw this movie, Invictus, this powerful, powerful story of Nelson Mandela. And, certainly we all know about the incredible suffering that he went through. It's unimaginable. And then what he did to unify an entire nation through sport. And so I'm in the theater by myself with maybe two other people because it was in the afternoon. And just suddenly began to feel that emotion that Jonathan Haidt talks about, elevation. And this is that emotion where when we're observing some act of moral beauty, moral goodness, if you will, or moral excellence, and then we feel the physiological sensations in our body of that emotion. So as a response to that moral goodness, the tingling in the chest and the warmth in the stomach and the tingling down the fingers. And then most importantly, we feel motivated to do good because of watching that, because of that moral goodness. And so I'm feeling those sensations that we often feel to one of our favorite movies. And I am motivated to do good because of the direct cause from this movie. And so I actually I stayed for the whole credits, so watched the whole movie and kind of sat with the experience a little bit, and then actually had a strong motivation and desire to talk more openly with my wife about this issue, and to actually, I just found myself saying, I want to spend more time with your parents now. So I kind of had made sort of almost like a 180 shift in trying to talk her into spending more time with them. So there was nothing in the movie about that kind of dialogue one-on-one, but something about watching that moral goodness, that portrayal of bravery and perseverance, and that portrayal of kindness that he shows to his all the people that work for him, and his incredible ability to build a nation and a team was just so inspiring, and it made me want to be better as well. So I don't know how to study that. I'm not a researcher, but those kind of human experiences and nuances what I would be like to see more. And my passion is movies, so I'd like this to be studied more. This aspect of cinematic elevation and how to tease apart all the different issues of that, of how viewers approach movies and what goes into the viewer's experience. How do you prepare a viewer for the movie? What type of movies make the biggest impact? What character strengths can most be susceptible to be building up, and that experience of elevation around those strengths for us to really to do better in society? Because I really believe then that if we allow it, movies can impact us, and then they can change us, but also really change the world. And there are actually major programs called entertainment education that are doing that, just that, in third world countries, bringing movies and mass media to have an impact on the world. So, okay, none of that I was planning on saying. So now let me say what I was planning on saying here today. Two topics. I'll go fairly brief because we've got a terrific panel. One is I really want to encourage more communication between researchers and practitioners. And I really think that that's really one of the keys. I mean, that's what positive psychology is all about science and practice and building bridges between the two. And I just don't think that we really have that. I mean, some people that are really sort of kind of go-getters can really kind of go after the research, but we don't really have any mechanisms that I know of to really kind of make that bridge. You know, researchers are often in their silos doing their work, sticking with their work, and that's it. Practitioners are in their silos doing their work, and that's kind of it. But I would really love to see more interaction. I mean, my approach has been to just try to stay in touch with researchers and learn what they're doing and try to understand it in more of a practical way so that I can kind of then disseminate that to other practitioners. But it would be great if there was more formal mechanisms for that. And by practitioners, I mean all practitioners. I mean not just psychologists, like a lot of us here, but also coaches and educators and even business professionals working with employees are practitioners as well. And I think researchers should be connecting with those individuals as well, education leaders and those in the business world. You know, one sort of problem in this whole area that I see from the practitioner standpoint is and Todd alluded to this, is that practice really sort of tries to run ahead of the research. Research always lags behind. The science always lags behind. And the problem is practitioners are so hungry for this stuff. I mean, as a practitioner, I love reading new positive psychology interventions or articles or new things that come out. And so do all of the people that attend our VIA workshops. People are so hungry. I mean, so anybody that's leading always have a captive audience because people are so hungry for this stuff because it's substantive and it's meaningful. And so there's couple that hunger with practitioners having to work with someone in front of them who is suffering. So the practitioner has to do something with this person that's suffering in front of them. And they want to be able to use traditional approaches, CBT and other approaches in traditional psychology, but they also want to use this stuff that they've been hungry for, this positive psychology stuff. So that hunger combined with this suffering client in front of them, practitioners have to do something. So then, therefore, they start to apply things, and they sometimes don't apply it in the best of ways, and therefore practitioners run far ahead of the science. So that's kind of one problem. I don't really have a lot of the solutions. I'm wondering if those in the audience have solutions. So bridging the gap more between researchers and practitioners, having more open dialogues. I think Mike might talk a little bit about tapping deeper into the American Psychological Association as a method, accelerating research, teaching more evidence-based practices. So, you know, those are just some ideas. Curious what you all will think. But I want to talk about one more piece, and that is I'd like to see more in the future, more integration among positive psychology theories and practices, and also positive with traditional psychology practices. So, in terms of my some of my work at VIA, working with the character strengths, I'd like to see a lot more work with this with psychotherapy. And originally, when this whole field of positive psychology was created, it was created around the notion that psychology has been half-baked, just focusing on the negative and not much on the positive. And yeah, there's a lot of truth to that, and that's helped to really bring forth this incredible field and a lot of our passion. But I don't know that we, as practitioners, have done a good job at baking the full loaf of bread, where we're blending in the traditional work with the positive psychology work. I would say not. Those people in my workshop, the coaches and psychologists and educators, as I've been presenting this stuff, it's kind of brand new to try to mix all of these things together and to try to integrate in both sides. And that's certainly I see where the future is. And I know that there's programs coming up. They're going to be Speaking to that more directly, for example, I was in correspondence with a woman from Australia who is doing some research on blending in schema therapy with the character strengths work. So what she's studying is the character strengths as a way of mapping our problematic schemas. Schemas are our faulty beliefs, and Jeffrey Young is a leading figure in this. It's sort of a cognitive behavior therapy approach that has to do with identifying our schemas. So things like problematic beliefs like unrelenting standards, having this belief that it's never good enough. Or the schema of self-sacrifice or abandonment, and there's a whole list of schemas. And so mapping these out and integrating it in with the character strengths work. So if you have a particular faulty schema, what at your core, your character strengths, what at your core is being suppressed? And so if you tap into that core, tap into those particular strengths, how can you then work through that particular schema? So it's a real preliminary study, and of course, as most preliminary studies go, lots of positive benefits were found: lower depression, anxiety, and stress. But this kind of research is what's needed. You know, another way that this integrates in for us psychotherapists is the field positive psychotherapy that Tayyab Rashid has created. And he has a formal 16-week program to help to teach people how to blend in best practices in positive psychology with what's going wrong with people. So with people that are depressed, and has found great benefits with that in his preliminary studies. So that's kind of another way. There's another person that's looking at it with psychodynamic therapy. You know, there are so many different possibilities. And let me hit on another area in terms of this integration stuff. One of my biggest passions is mindfulness. And this has been something I've been practicing and working with for well over a decade, and it's one of my favorite topics. And one thing that's just never coming up, ever, in any conversation, I think Todd might be the only person that knows this, but the operational definition of mindfulness, with this hot topic in positive psychology, is actually two character strengths, more or less, essentially. One of the strengths is self-regulation, and the other is curiosity. I'm being a little general when I say this, because it's more than that. Those two strengths don't explain all of mindfulness, but they're a huge part of it, and no one really seems to know this, because there's lots of other definitions floating around. And so when we're being more mindful, this kind of process that can help us in infinite amounts of ways, and is certainly not a passing fad, like some positive psychology people believe. This is here to stay, no doubt. But when we're being mindful, we're taking control of our attention. That's really what we're doing. We're self-control with our attention. We're bringing it back to the present moment, or we're bringing it to a topic, or bringing it to our thoughts. We're observing our thoughts, metacognition. You know, we're using that process or strength of self-regulation. And when we are being mindful and we are regulating our attention, what are we doing with our present moment? Well, we're taking an attitude of curiosity, an attitude of openness to what's here in the moment. So open to negative experiences, open to suffering and pain, open to meeting, open to the goodness, opening to the whole picture, all of the vicissitudes of life, and sort of an attitude of acceptance as well. So there's so much fodder there in terms of integration. Mindfulness really is a meta process for so many things. Certainly, I believe, will be found for all of the character strengths. So when we become more mindful, we become more tuned in to our capacity for perseverance, our capacity for fairness, our capacity for meaning-making, our capacity for et cetera, et cetera. And if we're more mindful and aware of our experiences moment to moment in various situations in our lives, then we're that much able to tune into when we might be overusing a character strength, which hardly anyone's talking about. Robert's one of the few people that's talking about that, how we can get in trouble if we overuse our character strengths. And there's just a multitude of possibilities when we look at that. Or when we look at underusing our character strengths. Some survey research by Alex Lindley has shown that only a third of people have a meaningful awareness of their strengths. So that's a huge problem. So we need mindfulness deeply in this work of character strengths and with many other areas of work. And I could go on and on. I love thinking about how the character strengths work. If character strengths are at our core, our deeper self, our essence, if you will, we really see that as sort of the river that runs through positive psychology. Because if that's at our core, that links in with almost anything you can come up with, because that's just at the core of human beings. So, so you can talk about character strengths and flourishing. And there's not much research on that, which is kind of amazing. There's lots of research on positive emotions and flourishing and the 3-to-1 ratio. But what about sort of the obvious? How could flourishing not be deeply embedded with someone that's living a life from their character strengths? But research just hasn't been done, to my knowledge. You know, you can link it in with positive institutions. And David Cooper, the father of positive institutions, if you will, from Case Western, talks about integrating in the VIA character strengths with all of his consulting work in organizations. And he has a book that'll be coming out on that. You know, or you could link it in with positive emotions, and I don't know that that's been very much studied. So if you try to build up the emotion of hope and gratitude and interest, does that actually build up the trait of hope and curiosity and gratitude, or other traits maybe? So there's so much kind of dynamic possibilities with this work, so much to be integrated in, and I'm just kind of sticking with the positive psychology topics. I'm not even going into more other topics, like with traditional psychology and so forth. So I think I'll pause there. I'm not even sure how I'm doing in time. I'm probably over, as I almost always am. So let me pause, and do we want to take questions, Paul, or pass the baton? Questions or comments on ways that you think that there could be better bridges between researchers and practitioners, or this integration topic?
Hi, Ryan. Thanks for that. Yeah, I think what's going on in positive psychology now is very much reminiscent of when I first started off in the area of behavioral medicine health psychology in 1979, 1980. That was 30 years ago. There were no textbooks available 30 years ago in the area of behavioral medicine health psychology. There were no journals, as there are now, dozens of journals in the area of health psychology, behavioral medicine. 30 years ago, there was nothing. They just started off. The Yale conference, I believe, was in 1978. Graduate programs came on later. So look at the development that's happened in the area of positive behavioral medicine, health psychology in 30 years. The recent practitioner journals that Ryan talked about, I think now they came on many years later in behavioral medicine journals now for practitioners. But look how long that took. It took over 20 years, I believe, for those journals to come online. And I think the science came on first, and then the practitioners came on. I mean, and I remember reading as a young graduate student warnings. Let's not be over enthusiastic. Let's not make claims that go beyond the data, because there were all kinds of worries about, you know, over claiming and then really undermining, you know, the progress to be made in the area of behavioral medicine and health psychology. And so I think I would love to see somebody, hopefully in this room, write an article on, let's not, you know, go down and make all the same pitfalls that happen in behavioral medicine and health psychology, because, you know, there's hardly any textbooks out there now. I mean, you know, it's the same position now. I mean, we're 30 years behind. So what we need to do is all come back here when we're older and wiser in 30 years and say, look, you know, we avoided all the pitfalls and we made a lot more progress than they made in 30 years. We made 60 years worth of progress in 30 years in health psychology by learning the lessons from what happened in behavioral medicine and health psychology 30 years ago. So anybody want to volunteer to write that article on what we can learn from the history of behavioral medicine and health psychology and benefit from that in the area of positive psychology?
Since I'm one of the shorter people on the panel, I figure I'll get up here where I get a little bit of height advantage. We should have a competition, stand back to back and see. The first thing I want to say, I woke up thinking this morning, that I'd like to make the comment that we've been talking about positive psychology here a little bit as if it's a dogma and Martin Seligman is the Pope. And actually, it's a very, very distributed study. There are lots of people with different interests. Martin Seligman certainly has a big voice, but his is not the only voice, and people don't all sit at his footsteps and follow what he says. Also, positive psychology is not just the study of happiness. I think of the division as being, you know, we focus with what we sometimes look for a word, traditional psychology, with what happens when things go wrong in people's lives, what can we do to ameliorate it, and the call to action was, let's turn our focus and also study what goes right in people's lives. Why does it go right? What can we learn from it? What can we do to help people out? So let me refer to another psychologist whom I very much admire, Albert Bandura, who has made the comment that psychology has very, very poor social diffusion mechanisms. Things get learned in academia, things get learned in research that don't make it out to the public. And his work, I mean, the way he has decided to make a difference in the world is in terms of stories. So in many parts of the world, there are TV shows, radio shows, etc., that are focused on a particular sort of social issue. And the stories tend to be constructed with somebody who's doing, has good, let me just put it sort of the good, the bad, and the middle. Somebody who has the behavior that they're trying to push towards, somebody who has the other kind of behavior. So let's take the question of AIDS, sort of safe sex, not safe sex, and then somebody who's transitional in between. And what they found is that this is a very effective way of helping to take the ideas that people come up with in academia, in research, etc., and take it out to the world where it can make a difference. Now, I'm a practitioner. If I had gotten into this just a little bit younger, I might have been a researcher, but I just don't have, I sort of feel like I don't have time left in my life to go get a PhD. So I have 30 years experience in software engineering, and now I'm looking at the world and finding positive psychology has lots and lots of interesting ideas. And oh, by the way, people will also say things like, what's wrong with positive psychology? There's not enough focus on mindfulness, as if it were one big thing. The fact is, there will be interest, there will be focus on mindfulness when there are researchers and people who are interested enough in mindfulness to study it. So it's a whole collection of people around the world studying different things, and that comes together as positive psychology. So given that I can't go back and get a PhD and become a researcher, my interest right now is what Todd and Hart calls the bridge between Main Street, the Ivory Tower and Main Street. So how do we take the ideas that we come up with in the research, how do we take them out where they can make a difference in people's lives? So if I'd gotten myself organized, I would have one single slide here. I don't have the picture, so you're just going to have to imagine this picture. I have one column that's academic positive psychology and one column that's applied positive psychology. And in the academic side, we have people coming up with models. We have people coming up with possible interventions, creating hypotheses around them, and then going through empirical ways of testing to see, do those hypotheses work? What can we learn from them? On the applied side, we have people who are studying particular domains. What does it mean in an engineering environment to talk about some of these ideas? How do you translate them into words that make sense here? Then to take the models and see what's relevant for this environment. What could make sense here? What could make a difference here? And then to take the interventions and say, how could we adapt those interventions so they might make a difference in this environment? So, for example, when I talk to engineers about positive emotions, let me just start out by saying one of the things you have to be really careful about is not to whitewash the worlds that people are in. But the fact is that people do spend a lot more time complaining in many environments than they spend actually taking any kind of action that might make things better. So sometimes what you can do is to help people, you listen to people's complaints with respect and then say, and now what can we do working from there? Okay, but when you talk to people, and when I talk to engineers about positive emotions, I take them back to the latest design meeting they were in, where you had side A and side B and maybe side 3, and they're all butting heads like this, and everybody walks out of the room totally dissatisfied because they haven't made any progress. And I say, there is some research that shows that if you can induce some positive emotion, that people actually become a little bit more open-minded. So let's play around here, and instead of starting the meeting with, we start the meeting with some kind of positive experience. So it turned out I was mediating one argument between two groups. They both happened to be, there were people on both sides who were hockey fans. So we spent the first few minutes in the meeting talking about a hockey game, and the Carolina Hurricanes had actually won the game, so everybody, that actually raised a positive emotion. And that created a sense of commonality and a little bit of enjoyment before we got into the argument, and we came out with a good result. Now, can I actually make a statement, positive emotion, this is evidence that positive emotion makes a difference in this environment? No. I mean, that's one case, one story, etc. I'm just trying to say that it's a way of we have to be able to take the ideas that we come up with in limited environments with a lot of times studying sophomores in college and whatever, and we have to see what is it that actually can be translated into something that's useful. I know that I've talked to a few people here who say, I'm looking for things that I can take home and put to work in my environments. I want to have ideas, questions, tools that I can actually use that can make a difference in the way that I operate. And how do I take of meaningfulness, and how do I take that and help people see how important it is and how it can make a difference in their environments? So I just like to put in a plug for the practitioners and say the big thing we need is a feedback loop where what the practitioners find with their pilot studies goes back to be studied by people who are in research, and so that we keep coming around and being able to broaden what we do. But we can't just say that, well, for one thing, if you tried to explain something to a large audience and you were absolutely precise about the conditions under which it was true, people would be falling asleep. It's not, people don't remember that kind of details. They remember stories. Now, you have to be careful with stories because, one story does not a truth make, right? There are all kinds of exceptions, etc. But sometimes the story can create a sense of possibility. That if Interface Inc., for example, can turn their company around to focus on sustainability, maybe it's possible for my company to do that. So, to use stories and to translate into the terms that people can understand, to be thinking about what it means in this domain, that's what practitioners contribute. And it's, I think, an important part of the whole picture.